In this lesson, we're looking at how we use multiple if functions nested together. This allows us to ask more than one question with multiple outcomes. On this example sheet, you can see we got a small pricing spreadsheet for various drink items: lemonade, water, cola, fruit juice. And you'll notice that it says that if a customer buys less than 30 bottles, they pay the full price, which is denoted in this D column. If they buy between 30 and 50 bottles, they get a low discount per bottle, and if they buy over 50 bottles, they get a high discount. Now, you may remember on an earlier lesson, the if function has three attributes: the question, the true, and the false. If you're not familiar with the basic if, then we recommend you view that video first. So how do we ask more than one question? Well, we use multiple if statements. So we could use another if statement and nest them together. Now here we've got two of these, and let's just demonstrate in an example of what we could do. If we have this question here asking if the customer has bought less than 30 bottles, well, he either has or he hasn't. Well, let's say, for example, he has bought less than 30 bottles. Then the answer to the question is true. And Excel will jump to this part here and perform whatever we've written there. In our case, charging them the full price per bottle. If they haven't bought less than 30, then the answer to the question is false. And what Excel will do, it will jump from here to here. Now, when it arrives at the false, what we want to do is to put a second if function there. So when it arrives here, it starts the whole if procedure off again. Let me just demonstrate that. If I took all of this and pop it in there, now you can see what will happen if the customer has bought less than 30 bottles. Well, if he has, we know it's going to end up here. But if it is more than 30 bottles, the answer to this question is false, and it will end up here. When it arrives here, it sees there's another if function, so it starts the whole process off again. If the customer bought more than 50 bottles, do this or do this. Now, some people think we need three if functions for this to be performed because we have three questions. If you think about it logically, we don't need this between one. If we have just two questions, under 30 and over 50, if you think about it, if it's neither of those, then it must be between 30 and 50. So that could be our last false here. It'd be better if we write this for you to get an understanding of how this works. We're going to concentrate just on the lemonade here. So we begin by writing equals if open bracket. We're going to ask our question if this quantity over here, if the quantity is less than, that's a closed chevron, 30. Now we've finished with that part of the question, so we do comma. It's now asking us what do we want to do if the answer to that question is true, that they have bought less than 30 bottles, well, we need to charge them the full price, which is £4. Now that's per bottle. So I now want it to perform a calculation. What I want it to do is to take the quantity and multiply it by the £4, comma. It's now asking for the value if the answer to that question is false. Well, if it's false, that means they haven't bought 30 bottles. I now need to check to see if they've bought more than 50. So I need to start the whole if function off again. So we type if open bracket. You'll notice the colour of the bracket changes. We ask our question again. You have to write the question every time. So in this case, if this quantity over here is greater than, that's an open chevron, 50. So if the quantity is greater than 50, comma, the value, if it's true, means that they'll be paying £3 per bottle. So I want it to do a calculation based on that price. So that will be, can you take the quantity and multiply it by the £3 price, comma, value if false. Well, if it ends up here, then obviously the answer to the first two questions was false and false. And it's going to end up here. So they didn't buy less than 30 and they didn't buy more than 50. So they must have bought something in between. In which case we don't need to ask another question. It will end up here by default. So I just need to tell it what to do. When it arrives here, we'll take the quantity, multiply it by the low discount price, the £3.50. I then close the bracket for that if function that I'm writing. But don't forget that we actually put this if function with the red brackets on it inside our original if. So I've got to close the bracket for that. And there's a nested if function. If we enter that, we get the price. I can then copy this straight down because it is relative. And there's all of the prices. If we look at this, they've bought 20 bottles, which means they've bought less than 30. So we charge them £1 each. And here you can see it is £1 each, and that comes up to £20. If they bought an in-between price, say for example 40 bottles, the price is now £32 because that'd be 40 times 80 pence per bottle. And finally, if they bought more than 50, so if we said 100 bottles, because we're now charging them 50p per bottle, it's £50. And this is the real power of if functions, because now I will never have to change these at all. The prices of drinks will change regularly and the quantities will change every single day. But this will always work out the correct price for the quantity they've purchased. And that's called a nested if function.